Got nobody live just yet, nobody with us. It's all right. We're just going to go ahead and do the introduction. Hey, Texas Study students. This is Coach Signs welcoming you back to another one of our live editions here on YouTube of, we're doing distance learning, guys. So hopefully you have logged on with us. Hey, guys, everybody there on the comments, all of you guys that are joining us, I just want to say thank you, guys. These are unprecedented times as to what we're doing, how we're learning. But guys, we got to roll with it. We just got to continue to move forward with that. Okay. So with that being said, hopefully you guys have your notes. I went ahead and put them on there for us. They're on your Google Classroom, chapter 18, chapter 18. The Reign of King Cotton. So if you guys would love to, on the next tab, go ahead and open up that PowerPoint, guys. That way you follow along with me. Okay, I'll give you guys a few seconds to do that. Hey, guys, everybody, I could see everybody commenting there on the chat. Guys, once again, please let everybody that you know that is in my class to hop on here. I'm going to be trying to go live every Tuesday and Thursday, at least twice a week. That way we can talk, and you guys can comment. I hope you guys are doing okay. I hope everyone is staying safe, especially with everything that's happening right now with the whole Hidalgo County being on a shelter in place. Please take care of yourself. Remember social distancing. Wash your hands. Just make sure that you guys are okay. Make sure that your parents are okay. And if your parents are either nurses, they work in the for the Border Patrol, or they work for the government in any shape or form, guys. Hey, if they work in the front lines, EMT, medical, anything like that, guys. Hey, I just want to give them a big shout out to them for being in the front lines and working for us and taking care of us. Okay. Well, with that being said, let's go ahead and start, guys. So we're talking about chapter 18, the reign of King Cotton. So if you look at our PowerPoint, right, we're going to go ahead and move over to our second slide. It talks about the economy after the Civil War. Okay. People's savings were essentially tied up in Confederate bonds, which became worthless. Confederate bonds, guys, was a way of how the government would say, hey, look, buy these bonds, buy essentially parts of the government we're selling to you. That way, with the money that you're giving us in return for that bond, we can essentially fund our soldiers, pay for food, pay for clothes, pay for supplies, so that they can go fight, right? Well, after the Civil War, all these bonds, they're worthless. They're no good no more. Okay? Pretty much it's the people saying, hey, Confederate Army, you're a lying dog-faced pony soldier, and these things are worthless. So with that being said, it was like, what are we going to do? What is the people going to do? It says there, the bond is a certificate issued by the government promising to pay back money borrowed with interest. Over time, it was going to take more money. The interest was going to grow with that. Okay. But the economy being worthless, the Southern economy being worthless, they said, hey, this Confederate government just went to shams. What are we going to do? So this led to even bigger problems, and that was credit problems. During the Civil War, businesses had sold goods to the Confederate government on credit, and now the debts would never be paid off. A credit is an agreement where a buyer is allowed to pay over a period of time. So with that, it's like if you have a credit card, right? The credit card company allows you to have a certain amount of money, but every time that you swipe your credit card, they're going to charge you a 25% interest. Well, that's $25 out of 100 that you spend. So if you will essentially do that. Okay. So with that being said, a lot of these people who supported the South were essentially, hey, we're going to give you this money on credit. You guys can pay us back later. Well, once again, did that really happen? No, it didn't happen. What ends up happening, guys, essentially is that, hey, the South goes down and the government that was going to eventually repay, boom, there's no such thing. So these people are left with without money, one, without money, and two, essentially saying, hey, I lent out thousands of dollars, if not maybe a couple of million to this war effort, and now who is going to pay me back? Is the U.S. government going to pay me back? No, this Confederate government just went under the tank. So how can he do that? How can they pay us back? Okay. So what we end up seeing, guys, is this distrust of the Southern government from the South, right? So people are saying, you know what? If I can't trust them, then what are we going to do? Essentially, we need to essentially take up our own place and come up with ourselves. So we see the return of small farms. On our little third section there, it says, as more businesses ended up failing, many ended up losing their jobs. For many, the only way to survive was to grow their own food. As a result, the small farm became common in Texas again. This kind of shows us where we are right now, especially in today and what's happening right now. So here's the thing. Right now, we're living in tough times, guys. There's a lot of businesses that are being shut down, and not because they want to. It's essentially because we're living in a pandemic and a time where, this coronavirus is very contagious. So what are they trying to do? Boom. They are trying to make sure that everybody is separated, that there's social distancing. So what has that caused? That's caused a lot of people essentially to lose their job. Hopefully none of your parents have lost their jobs, and if they have, I'm sorry, guys. I'm praying for them. This government has now established, help for us, and it's coming. It's on the way for those families who have lost their jobs, and especially for those small businesses that are doing that. So how does that tie back to what we're talking about? Well, nowadays what we have to do, guys, or essentially what we could do is, if you have the ability to essentially go out and buy food, a lot of people are asking for you to shop local. What does that mean? Go to a local restaurant, go to a local pizza place, a local burger joint. Instead of going to the big chains, right? Shop local. Keep the local small businesses running to be able to support their employees, right? So that is essentially what happened back then. Big businesses, essentially failed because the government could not take care of them, or they pretty much lied to them, right? So what they ended up doing is they ended up coming back home in the small farms, growing their own food, right, in these small farms. And this became a common thing within Texas. Okay. So now we're going to talk about a different styles of farming and essentially different styles of agriculture. Hey guys, I see everybody there commenting. All right. We're going to talk about subsistence farming. Okay. Subsistence farming essentially happens after the Civil War. Most Texas farmers turned to subsistence farming, where only enough food was grown to meet the family needs. Okay. So with that being said, it's like, hey, I'm not going to need to grow 50, 60, 70 acres. No, hey, for me and my family, essentially we may need an acre. And within that acre, I'm going to grow a little tomato, a little onion, a little potato, a little lettuce, plus I got a cow, that I can essentially, tear into pieces and make different type of meats and cuts for it. So it's like, hey, you know what? There it is. I've got enough food to sustain me and my family. That essentially what ends up becoming this subsistence farming. Okay. The next style that we're going to talk about, guys, is going to be tenant farming. So if you look at that next session, that tenant farming, you know, that big thing that really essentially pops up right there is boom, that for rent sign, right? And when we look at it, why for rent? Okay. Tenant farming, guys, since many people lost their land after their Civil War, many turned to tenant farming, right? Where they could rent the land on which they lived in. But the only problem with that, guys, was rental payments never ended. There's no ownership, right? If you have rented something, or you know, have you ever, you know, they used before all this, right? Before the creation of the online streaming, right? Before even Redbox. Well, you know, Redbox is a renting system where you go, you rent it, and it's essentially you're paying per day that you use it. Is it essentially yours? No, it's not yours. You're only renting it, right? And this was the same thing with this land. These people would work these land for many, many years, and the price would be just enough to where they could not, uh, you know, afford to own it, but yet they had enough money to essentially, boom, stay there and sustain it. Okay, so this was tenant farming. And once again, the only problem was that you never became the true owner of this property. And this also, once again, falls back to the realization that because many people had a lot of land during the Civil War, right, but yet lent out their money to the government and they could not recuperate that money, right, they can no longer make the payments on that land. So the government takes the land and now they got to rent it out from somebody who buys it. Okay. So the next section we're going to talk about, guys, is essentially sharecropping. So go ahead and move down to the next slide with me there. So sharecropping, guys, it talks about tenant farming where farmers receive a share of the value of the crop minus the rent and expenses. So what essentially does that mean? If we go on a little deeper, it says sharecroppers owed their crop to the landlord and had to buy food and clothing on credit. So it's essentially what it becomes, guys, is where someone was to put you in charge of a area, and that's it. That crop essentially is going to be the landowners. You're just working the field. You don't own it. You're not renting it. Essentially, and then to add even two more of that, the owner's going to tell you, hey, look, dude, I can give you food and I can give you some clothing, but you know, it's going to be on credit, you know. So if I'm paying you $5 a week, right? I'm talking about, you know, in the late 1800s, you know, it's going to cost you $5, $10 for clothes and food for the week. So you kind of owe me money. That's essentially what sharecropping becomes. If we look at that picture, guys, that sharecropping cycle, essentially it becomes like literally a cycle of, you know, kind of repetition. You know, you work the land, essentially you work the land and you give the crop to the owner, right? And the owner says, okay, that's cool and everything, but you know, I need more money. I'm going to charge you for essentially working the land. But you're going to need clothes, you're going to need food. I can provide that for you at a cost. Is that going to be okay? And the landowner says, yeah, sure, that's fine, as long as you don't overcharge me. But is that true? Probably not. I'm going to give me guys 1 second. I'm looking for that picture of sharecropping. Here it is. Okay, I'm looking for it on my phone because on the screen there on the computer, it's not that good. There we go. Okay, so if we look at that cycle, right, the cycle begins starting at that top left section of that picture on the PowerPoint. Hopefully you guys are following with me. Those of you guys in the comments, making sure that you guys are on the PowerPoint. I can see you guys, you know, just typing away, you keyboard warriors. All right, the landowner provides land and tools to the sharecropper in exchange for part of the crop, right? So as we move over, going into the cycle, right? The sharecropper borrows goods from merchants on credit, right? during the growing season. So not only is he borrowing the land, he's also borrowing goods from everybody else, right? So essentially debt and debt, right? So we continue this cycle, right, going down. Low crop prices or a poor harvest, okay, caused by poor weather, crop disease, or other factors often leaves the sharecropper in debt or with little to no work to show for that season of food, right? So essentially puts this family, the sharecropper, in a bind. And then once again, the whole cycle starts. So essentially, could you have broken out of the cycle? Yeah, but you really got to depend on making sure that your crop that year is really good. Excuse me. But even if that, if you haven't paid it off, or if you haven't paid off your other debts in the other part of the cycle, then you're just going to end up in that endless cycle. Okay. So as we move on, that cycle of poverty, along with poor Anglos, African American families also had to turn to sharecropping to survive. Okay. Sadly, this system established a cycle of debt and poverty that was very difficult to break free from, because you end up owing money to not only the landowner, guys, but because of the tools that you rented, right? You end up in so much money to those two people, if you remember, on the little 3-tier system, right? But once you go down into that, you're just hoping and you're working hard that your crop essentially becomes really good. Okay, really, essentially, you're hoping that your work over that time has become excellent. That way, you essentially can use that money to sell and move forward. Okay, we're on that cycle of poverty, right? But what helps essentially all this is the expansion of the railroads. Okay, because of the people growing essentially all these vegetables, agriculture, things like that. The expansion of the railroad system helps people to sell their goods to different parts of Texas and the area. By 1890, Texas had over 8,000 miles of railroad tracks. And by the early 1900s, goods could be shipped to any place in the United States from anywhere in Texas. So this allows, guys, for essentially people to not only kind of break away from that cycle of debt, but hopefully they've got a good enough crop that they could send off to different parts of Texas. Okay. Now with that expansion, guys, right? This is where we look at the encouragement of expansion. This encouraged farmers to buy land for commercial farms from railroad companies who owned a lot of Texas land, right? Farm and cities grew along the railroads into West Texas, right? We see the essentially, if you're looking at that PowerPoint, guys, which I hope that you guys are, you can see on that map that I've illustrated there for you the railroad system in the 1900s, right? And how essentially it kind of looks like a spider web. It's kind of just trickling out from the eastern part of Texas. It just kind of moves, right, and grows. Okay. Looking at that map, guys. Okay. But what essentially comes to the creation of all this, we see this huge push once again for the cotton industry. All right, the cotton industry. Because of the expansion of the railroads, right, this allowed the cotton industry to continue just to skyrocket, guys. It just takes off. Okay. Cotton ends up producing so much more money in the southern states, right? And that's why it ends up becoming King Cotton. That's why we titled it today King Cotton. Yeah, we learned about farming and all this, and essentially the different types of farming after the Civil War. But what ended up making them rich before the Civil War ends up returning again to make them rich after the Civil War, and that's the return of cotton. Okay, so with that being said, guys, This is covering our chapter 18 video lesson, right? Our distant learning lesson, right? Uh, Guys, I see you guys there in the comments. I hope you guys are doing good. Guys, please stay safe. Please, I'll be back on here hopefully next Tuesday once again at 1 p.m. Guys, please tell all of your classmates to hop on here. That way they know exactly what's happening, what's going on. At the same time, guys, hey, check your Google Classrooms. I know yesterday I sent out a little, just a little essay for you guys just to type up, that way you guys can know exactly where we're at, okay? With that being said, guys, please take care of yourselves. Please take care of your families. Stay safe out there, guys. We'll see you guys here on Tuesday with chapter 19. All right, we'll be talking about chapter 19 on Tuesday. I will be posting a little, just probably like another little 2-question, maybe 3-question a thing on Google Classroom. So just make sure that you look out for that. And guys, please, I ask that, you get your parents involved with this, that you make sure that they know what's happening. Looking at the comments, and I don't know what you guys are doing there. I might have to disable those. But make sure that your parents know what you guys are up to, guys, and just watching with this and just Google Classroom, guys. Please, I ask you to keep on the lookout for that. With that being said, guys, hey, take care of yourselves. Practice social distancing. Make sure that you guys take care of your family. Be safe, guys. God bless y'all. And this is Coach Signs signing out.